As someone who's interested in self-defense, kung fu, and interested in psychology, I chose to read the book The Better Angels of Our Nature: Why Violence Has Declined by Steven Pinker. And it did prove to be a very fascinating exploration into the intricate web of human aggression, its origins, and sort of the encouraging trend towards a hopefully less violent world in the future. So let's go back in history a bit. Let's look at the primal instinct for violence. And this served as a mean for securing resources through predation, as in being a predator. However, the risks associated with violence, coupled with the counterproductive act of harming one's kin who share our genes, led to the evolution of selective violence. Just to explain, evolution tends to be adaptive, and the people with the best genes tend to want to pass it down. And thus, when an individual wants to pass down their genes, they don't want to harm their kin, obviously. So that's why selective violence came to account. And Pinker in this book delves into the psychological underpinnings of violence, explaining how it can be employed to enhance social standing and access to resources, especially in the past where there was a hierarchical society which favored males. And this book also delves into the somewhat complex realm of sadism, which is a phenomenon that perplexes and challenges our understanding of human behavior even to this day. So, just in case you don't know, sadism is when an individual deliberately inflicts pain on someone just because the sight of the suffering it causes is experienced as enjoyable. And it's sort of confusing to understand what the role of sadism really is in human evolution, but it can be speculated that it has been developed as an intrinsic, intrinsic method designed to take effect only in extremely violent conditions, such as survival. So, in such a brutal condition or environment, having a sadistic instinct could actually aid survival, and the surrounding violence might trigger this instinct of sadism. But moving on, Pinker's insights into human ideologies also shed light on the unintended consequences of well-intentioned efforts to create a better world. And this goes into the psychological aspects of in-groups and out-groups. So I was actually revising this really recently in my psychology classes for a test, and it's about social identity theory, which means individuals identify themselves not only through their personal identity, but through their group identity, such as, let's say for me, I am Indian, so I might associate myself with that group identity. And there are four stages to this social identity theory: social categorization, social identification, and social comparison. And the fourth one is called social desirability bias. So the first one was, I think, categorization. So social categorization is when an individual divides people into in-groups and out-groups, which leads to polarization of like-minded individuals. So I think everyone else who is Indian is my in-group, let's just say hypothetically, and everyone who's not is an out-group. So that's the identification. Then comparison. Then identification comes next, which is where people start to identify with their group, start to adopt the behaviors and traits of that group, start to act more in a way that's sort of seen as a norm. Then there's comparison, where you compare your in-group to your out-group. And then social desirability bias is just a desire to compare your in-group in a more positive way to an out-group. So that's just a quick summary on that whole theory. But we go on tangents, but either ways. So the tendency to divide people into in-groups and out-groups, coupled with the polarization of like-minded individuals, can actually lead to the formation of dangerous ideologies, which can be seen in the past if you think of polarization of like-minded individuals and in-groups and out-groups. And I'm not sure how YouTube censorship policies work, but I'm sure you can imagine one. Now, the concept of group thinking, wherein toxic ideologies go unchallenged due to a fear of disharmony and not being accepted by the group, emphasizes the importance of critical thinking and open disclosure in combating violence. It's important to consider why people don't talk too much about violence, because they're scared to be cast away by their group, and this is something important to consider. Now, empathy. Empathy is unlike sympathy is where you say, I understand how you feel, but empathy is where you feel how you feel, like feel how the other person feels, is written here. So empathy is an evolutionary trait developed to care for kin, and it has a potential to transcend these group boundaries. So Pinker actually discusses how cultivating empathy by highlighting commonalities between different groups can actually foster understanding and reduce violence. However, he also warns about a dark side of empathy, which can lead to unfairness to certain people. Now, on another note, there's self-control. And self-control is really important in resisting violent impulses and your so-called intrusive thoughts. And it can be strengthened or weakened by practice. So, as you can see here, I've highlighted the prefrontal cortex. So, the prefrontal cortex is used to govern complex decision making and rational thinking. So, to make rational decisions about things like rewards, let's say. So, sometimes when you're not using your prefrontal cortex, another system starts taking play called the limbic system. And let's say, for example, when an immediate reward is offered, the limbic system sends an impulse to seize the opportunity, whatever the cost, even when it makes no rational sense. In contrast, the prefrontal cortex won't do it if it doesn't rationally make sense. So the prefrontal cortex must control such impulses so we can make a rational decision. In essence, the prefrontal cortex, I've said that many times now, is the neurological basis for our self-control or our willpower, which helps reduce violence. Now, Pinker also explores the influence of morality on violence, and he talks about 4 modes, which I'll just briefly skim over, which are communal sharing, authority ranking, equality matching, and market pricing. And these 4 modes can promote peace, but they also have the potential to justify violence, which really highlights the complex interplay between moral frameworks and human behavior. Now, this book also traces historical shifts that have contributed to the decline of violence over the centuries, and it talks about the pacification process, which was initiated 5,000 years ago when states in America, because it's an American author, monopolized violence, and the civilizing process driven by trading relationships and the humanitarian revolution, and how these have collectively shaped a less violent world. And Pinker emphasizes the role of reason in seeking peace, noting the increasing intelligence levels as per the Flynn effect, which is what I've written here, as in suggesting as individuals' IQs increase over centuries, they are more rational and are less likely to be violent, but rather seek peace. Now, as we've progressed to more modern times, the advent of the printing press, for example, has enabled the dissemination of ideas and has played a crucial role in the growth of humanism during, I think it was the 16th century, so not too modern. And this intellectual shift, coupled with the humanitarian revolution previously mentioned, contributed to a reduction in violence by promoting empathy and reason. So Pinker highlights that these positive strides are being made in Western attitudes and even toward homosexuality, which does emphasize the ongoing global struggle for LGBTQ rights, but does suggest that it is slowly getting better and violence is reducing. So that's something to stay hopeful about, as that only gets better in the future. So I hope you did find this interesting about how violence has changed across centuries, what influences violence, how we can control violence. And as I say with my other videos, do try to notice this in other people. Think about whether you're using your prefrontal cortex or your limbic system. So I do hope you found it interesting, and do make sure to like and subscribe below if you would like to see more key takeaway type of videos, and I'll see you soon.